Welcome to Paranormal Pages. Let's get straight into the True Scary Stories compilation. Story 1. Eliza's Reflection. I always believed mirrors held a piece of our souls. That's why I never trusted them. But nothing had prepared me for the chilling smile that now haunted my home. It started subtly, the corners of my wife's reflection curling up in a sinister grin, even as her face remained stoic. I thought it was a trick of the light, a fleeting illusion. But then, the reflection began to move. It was a lazy Sunday afternoon when I first noticed it. The air was still, the house quiet except for the distant hum of the city. My wife, Eliza, was reading in the living room, her face serene and focused. But as I passed by the hallway mirror, I caught a glimpse of her reflection. It was smiling, a wide, toothy, unnatural smile. I stopped, blinked, and looked again. It was gone. I shook my head, attributing it to lack of sleep or perhaps too much coffee. Days passed, and the reflection's antics grew bolder. It would wave at me, its movements fluid and mocking. Eliza's real form never mirrored these actions. She was oblivious to the doppelganger that lived in the glass. I started to avoid mirrors, but it didn't stop there. I would see it out of the corner of my eye, in windows, in any reflective surface. It was always there, watching, smiling. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the room, I saw it again. This time, it beckoned me closer with a crooked finger. I approached, heart pounding, as Eliza's reflection whispered my name. "Come closer," it hissed, its voice a distorted echo of my wife's. I could feel its cold presence seeping through the glass, chilling my soul. I reached out, compelled by a force I couldn't understand. My fingers touched the cold surface, and the reflection grinned wider. Soon, it whispered, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. I pulled away, but the image was burned into my mind. That night, I lay awake, listening to Eliza's gentle breathing, wondering what malevolent force had taken residence in our home. The following days were a blur of fear and confusion. I saw the reflection everywhere, in every shard of glass, every puddle of water. It was always smiling, always beckoning. I began to question my sanity, my reality. Was I losing my mind, or was there something truly sinister at play? As I write this, the reflection is watching me, its smile wider than ever. I can feel it calling to me, a siren song that promises answers but only delivers madness. I'm afraid to look, yet more afraid to look away. What does it want from me? Why does it torment me so? The days blurred into a nightmare. Eliza noticed my unease, the dark circles under my eyes, but I couldn't bring myself to tell her about the reflection. How could I explain something so absurd? Instead, I pretended everything was normal, even as the glass whispered to me. One evening, Eliza went out with friends, leaving me alone in our dimly lit apartment. I stood before the bathroom mirror, staring at my own reflection. The room felt colder, the air thick with anticipation. The reflection grinned, its eyes hollow, and I knew it hungered for something beyond my understanding. "Come closer," it urged, its voice echoing in my mind. "You want to see, don't you?" I hesitated, torn between fear and curiosity. What secrets did the mirror hold? What malevolence lurked behind its silvered surface? I leaned in, my breath fogging the glass. The reflection's smile widened, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. "Beyond," it whispered. "Beyond the veil." My heart raced. I had to know. I pressed my palm against the mirror, and it yielded like water, pulling me in. I stumbled into a shadowed realm, a twisted reflection of our apartment. The walls dripped with darkness, and the furniture sagged under unseen weight. Eliza's reflection stood there, waiting. Her eyes were empty voids, her skin translucent. "Welcome," she said, her voice a discordant melody. "You've crossed the threshold." "Why?" I managed to ask. "What do you want?" Her smile widened, and I saw galaxies within. "To be free," she said. "To escape this glass prison. But I need a vessel, a soul to trade." Her gaze bore into mine. "Yours will suffice." I stumbled back, panic clawing at my chest. "No," I whispered. "I won't let you." Eliza's reflection laughed, a sound that scraped against my sanity. "You have no choice," she said. "The mirror feeds on desire, on longing. You've always wanted more, haven't you? More than this mundane existence." She was right. I'd yearned for adventure, for purpose. But not like this. Not at the cost of my soul. I lunged for the mirror, but it rippled away, mocking me. "You can't escape," she taunted. "You're already part of the reflection." I woke up on the bathroom floor, my head throbbing. Eliza stood over me, concern etching her features. "What happened?" she asked. I couldn't tell her. How could I explain that her reflection wanted to devour me? That our love was a fragile barrier between worlds? Instead, I kissed her, tasted the salt of tears on her lips. "Nothing," I lied. "Just a dizzy spell." But the reflection watched from the mirror, its smile unyielding. It knew I was trapped, entangled in a web of glass and shadows. And as Eliza slept beside me, I wondered how long I could keep the truth hidden. The reflection haunted my every waking moment. Eliza remained blissfully unaware, her laughter echoing through our home as if nothing had changed. But I knew better. The mirror whispered to me, promising answers, power, and a life beyond the mundane. I researched ancient texts, desperate for a solution. The mirror was no ordinary glass, it was a portal, a gateway to a realm where desire and dread intertwined. I found references to a cursed artifact, a mirror forged by a sorcerer who hungered for immortality. Its victims became trapped, their souls fueling its malevolence. Eliza's reflection grew more insistent. It beckoned me, its smile now a rictus of hunger. "Join me," it murmured. "Together, we can break free." I resisted, but the mirror's pull was irresistible. It promised knowledge, forbidden secrets that would reshape reality. One moonless night, I stood before the mirror, trembling. "What do you want?" I demanded. "Why me?" Eliza's reflection leaned closer, its eyes twin voids. "Your longing," it said. "Your hunger for more. You've always felt it, haven't you? The ache for something beyond this existence." I thought of my mundane job, my unremarkable life. "And what do you offer?" "Immortality," it whispered. "Power. A world where mirrors are gateways, not traps." Its fingers brushed the glass, and I felt its icy touch on my skin. "All you have to do is step through." I hesitated. Eliza slept in the next room, her breath steady. Could I sacrifice her for my own desires? But the reflection knew my weakness, my darkest yearnings. It had studied me, learned my secrets. "Choose," it urged. "The mundane or the extraordinary." I closed my eyes, torn between love and ambition. "What's the catch?" "Your soul," it said. "Your essence will fuel the mirror. But think of the wonders you'll witness, the realms beyond, the forgotten gods, the mysteries of existence." I stepped closer, my reflection merging with Eliza's. "And her? Her soul remains untouched," it promised. "She'll forget you, move on. You'll be a fading memory." I glanced at the sleeping form of my wife. She deserved more than this, a life unburdened by my choices. I kissed her forehead, whispered my love, and turned back to the mirror. "Agreed," I said. The reflection grinned, its teeth sharp as shards of glass. "Welcome," it murmured, and the mirror swallowed me whole. Now, I exist between worlds, a phantom, a whisper. Eliza still smiles, unaware of the bargain I struck. But sometimes, when she gazes into the mirror, her reflection wavers. It beckons, and I wonder if she'll follow. And so, dear listener, beware the glass that grins. For within its depths lie choices that can shatter your soul. Hey! Subscribe for more true scary stories. Story 2. The Midnight Visitor. I awoke to the chilling silence of the night, punctuated only by the distant hum of the city. The digital clock cast a faint glow across the room, its digits reading 3:03 a.m. As my eyes adjusted, I noticed her, my daughter, Lily, standing motionless at the foot of my bed. Her eyes, usually vibrant with the innocence of youth, were now hollow, as if the light within had been snuffed out. "Lily?" I whispered, my voice barely rising above the stillness. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" She didn't move, didn't blink. Then, with a smile that sent shivers down my spine, she uttered the words that would haunt me, "He's here." The air grew colder, and I felt the presence of something unseen, a malevolent force that seemed to weigh upon the very atmosphere. I reached out to Lily, but she retreated into the shadows, her silhouette blending with the darkness. I rose from my bed, determined to protect her from whatever phantasm had invaded our home. The house was silent, too silent, as if it were holding its breath. I moved cautiously, my every step a thunderous echo in the quiet. As I passed Lily's room, I hesitated. The door was ajar, and within, I could see the remnants of her innocence, a room adorned with the cheerful clutter of childhood. But something was amiss. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and the walls, they seemed to whisper. I pressed on, driven by a father's need to shield his child. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices that seemed to rise from the very bowels of the earth. They spoke of secrets, of things hidden in the dark recesses of the world, and of us, of Lily and me. I found myself in the living room, the moonlight casting long, twisted shadows across the floor. And there, in the corner, stood a figure, shrouded in darkness. My heart raced, and I could feel the blood pounding in my ears. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice steady despite the fear that gripped me. The figure remained silent, its presence an oppressive weight in the room. I could sense its eyes on me, cold and unyielding. It was then that I understood, the darkness had come for us, and it would not leave without a claim. The house groaned as if it held secrets too heavy to bear. I followed the shadowed figure, my footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. The whispers intensified, their syllables weaving through the air like spectral threads. They spoke of ancient pacts, of forgotten rituals, and of a darkness that had slumbered for centuries. The figure led me to the basement, a place I had avoided since moving into this old Victorian house. The stairs creaked under my weight, and the flickering bulb barely illuminated the damp walls. The air tasted of decay, and I wondered how many souls had sought refuge here, seeking solace or escape. In the center of the room stood an ornate mirror, its surface tarnished and cracked. I stared into it, and my reflection wavered, as if reality itself were unraveling. The whispers grew louder, urging me to look deeper, to see beyond the glass. And there, in the mirror's depths, I glimpsed him, the man with hollow eyes, clad in tattered garments. His face was etched with sorrow, and his gaze bore into my very soul. He was the one Lily had spoken of, the one who had come for her. "Why?" I demanded, my voice echoing off the walls. "Why my daughter?" The man's lips moved, but no sound emerged. Instead, the mirror rippled, revealing scenes from another time. I saw Lily, innocent and carefree, playing in the backyard. And then, the darkness, the same darkness that now enveloped us both. "He seeks redemption," the whispers murmured. "A debt unpaid, a promise broken." I stumbled back, my mind reeling. What had I done? What pact had I unknowingly forged? The man in the mirror reached out, his fingers grazing the glass. I could feel his anguish, his longing for release. Lily appeared beside me, her eyes still vacant. She pointed to the mirror, her voice a mere breath. "Help him, Daddy. Set him free." But how? How could I unravel the threads of fate, untangle the web of centuries? I searched the room, desperate for answers. And then I saw it, a dusty tome, its leather cover worn and faded. The pages revealed a tale of forbidden love, of a man who had bargained with the shadows to save his beloved. But the price had been steep. He had become a vessel, a conduit for the restless spirits, forever bound to the mirror. I read the incantation, the words slipping off my tongue like venom. The mirror trembled, and the man's eyes flared with hope. But as the final syllable left my lips, the room shook, and the whispers turned into a scream. The mirror shattered, shards of glass embedding themselves in my skin. The man was gone, and so was Lily. Only the darkness remained, swirling around me, consuming everything. And then, from the fractured glass, a voice whispered, "You've set me free, but at what cost?" The shards of the mirror lay scattered like broken promises. The room reeked of sulfur, and the air was thick with malevolence. I stumbled over the debris, my hands trembling as I searched for Lily. She was nowhere to be found. The whispers persisted, urging me to seek answers. I returned to the tome, its pages now brittle and yellowed. There, in faded ink, I read of the man, the one who had become the mirror's keeper. His name was Elias Thorne, a scholar obsessed with the occult. Elias had loved a woman named Isadora, a beauty with eyes like midnight. But Isadora was cursed, her soul tethered to the mirror. Elias had made a pact with the shadows, exchanging his mortality for her salvation. He had become the vessel, the conduit through which the spirits whispered their secrets. And now, it seemed, Lily was the next link in this cursed chain. I retraced our steps, back to Lily's room. The walls pulsed with energy, and the whispers grew louder. I called out to her, my voice echoing through the empty house. But she remained elusive, a phantom slipping through my grasp. Then, in the corner, I saw it, a portrait of Elias and Isadora. Their eyes bore the weight of centuries, their love immortalized in brushstrokes. I studied their faces, searching for answers. What had Elias done to break the curse? How could I save Lily? The whispers guided me to the attic, a place I had never explored. The stairs groaned under my weight, and the air grew colder. The attic was a graveyard of forgotten memories, trunks, moth-eaten clothes, and relics from another era. And there, in the center, stood the mirror. It was whole again, its surface pristine. I touched it, and the whispers surged, filling my mind with visions. I saw Elias, tormented by guilt, seeking redemption. He had discovered the truth, the mirror was a gateway, a portal to the netherworld. But redemption came at a cost. The spirits demanded a sacrifice, a soul to replace Elias's own. And so, he had chosen Isadora, sealing her fate within the glass. But the curse was insatiable. It hungered for more. I looked into the mirror, my reflection wavering. "What do you want from me?" I asked. The whispers laughed, a chorus of lost souls. "Your daughter," they hissed. "Her soul is the key." I had a choice, to break the cycle or perpetuate it. I could save Lily, but at what cost? Elias had failed, and now it was my turn. The darkness pressed against my chest, threatening to consume me. And then, I saw her, Lily, standing at the threshold of the attic. Her eyes were no longer empty. They held a knowing, a wisdom beyond her years. She stepped toward me, her hand outstretched. "Help me, Daddy," she whispered. "Set me free." I hesitated, torn between love and duty. But as the clock struck 3:03 a.m., I made my decision. I would break the mirror, sever the ties that bound us. I would defy the darkness. But as I raised the hammer, the whispers changed. They no longer spoke of redemption, they spoke of vengeance. Elias's face appeared in the glass, twisted with rage. "You fool," he spat. "You cannot escape. The pact is eternal." And then, with a shattering crash, the mirror exploded, consuming us in shards of light and shadow. Hey! Subscribe for more true scary stories. Story 3. Scratches from Beyond. Every night, as the clock chimes midnight, a chilling scratching begins within the walls of my old Victorian house. At first, I dismissed it as the house settling or perhaps the scurrying of mice. But as the nights progressed, the scratching grew louder, more desperate. It seemed to follow me, confined within the walls of whatever room I occupied, a constant reminder that I was not alone. I decided to investigate, peeling back the layers of wallpaper to reveal the plaster beneath. To my horror, instead of the gnawed tunnels of rodents, I found symbols, strange, angular shapes that seemed to shift and writhe under my gaze. They were unlike any language I knew, yet they evoked a deep sense of dread within me. The next day, I visited the local library, poring over ancient texts and forgotten languages, but found nothing that matched the eerie script. That night, the scratching intensified, accompanied by a faint whispering. It was as if the walls themselves were speaking, uttering words in a tongue lost to time. I invited a friend over, hoping to prove to myself that I wasn't going mad. But as the clock struck 12, the scratching began anew, and the blood drained from my friend's face. "Do you hear that?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. I nodded, unable to speak as the whispers grew louder, surrounding us. In a moment of desperation, I pressed my ear against the wall, the symbols burning into my memory. The whispers became clear, speaking my name, beckoning me to join them. My friend grabbed my arm, pulling me away, but it was too late. The symbols had etched themselves into my mind, an indelible mark of the house's dark history. We spent the rest of the night searching the house's records, discovering tales of a previous owner, a reclusive scholar who dabbled in the occult. He had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only the mysterious symbols as a clue to his fate. As dawn broke, the scratching ceased, and the whispers faded. But the fear remained, a constant shadow at the back of my mind. I knew I had to uncover the truth behind the symbols and the scholar's disappearance. But little did I know, my search would lead me down a path of unspeakable terror. The day's light brought temporary relief, but the dread of nightfall loomed over me. I scoured the scholar's notes left in the dusty attic, hoping to find a connection to the symbols and the scratching. His writings were erratic, filled with references to otherworldly beings and gateways to realms beyond our understanding. It was clear he had been consumed by his quest for knowledge, a quest that led to his disappearance. As I delved deeper into the texts, I stumbled upon a diary entry detailing a ritual. The scholar believed the symbols were a key, a means to communicate with the entities that whispered through the walls. He intended to perform the ritual on the night of a new moon, the same phase the moon was in tonight. Determined to end the nightly torment, I resolved to complete the ritual myself. I gathered the necessary items, candles, chalk, and an antique mirror the scholar had mentioned in his notes. As the sun set, I drew the symbols on the floor, lit the candles, and positioned the mirror as instructed. The scratching started as I began the incantation, the words feeling alien as they left my lips. The air grew thick, the candles flickered wildly, and the mirror's surface rippled like disturbed water. Then, silence. The scratching stopped, and for a moment, I thought I had succeeded. But then, the mirror shattered, and from its broken pieces, a figure emerged. It was the scholar, his eyes hollow, his form ethereal. He spoke in a voice that was both his and not. "You have freed me, but they are coming for you now." Panic set in as the walls of my house began to crumble, revealing a vast, dark void beyond. Shadowy figures writhed in the darkness, their whispers growing into a cacophony of voices. The scholar's apparition pointed to the symbols: finish the ritual, or be lost forever. I scrambled to complete the incantation, the symbols glowing with an otherworldly light. The figures drew closer, their forms becoming clearer, twisted, humanoid shapes with eyes that burned like coals. Just as they were about to reach me, the ritual reached its climax, and a blinding light enveloped the room. When my vision cleared, the house was silent, the figures gone. But the relief was short-lived. In the mirror's remaining shard, I saw not my reflection, but a glimpse of another place, a place where the sky was an endless night, and countless eyes stared back at me. The shattered mirror lay before me, a portal to an unfathomable abyss. The scholar's warning echoed in my mind as I stared into the void. The symbols on the wall pulsated with a sinister energy, their glow casting long, twisted shadows across the room. I could feel the eyes from the other side, watching, waiting. I knew I couldn't leave the house, not with the gateway open and the entities that lurked just beyond my reality. The scratching had ceased, but the whispers had transformed into a low, menacing hum. It was the sound of something ancient and malevolent, something that had been waiting for a chance to enter our world. As night enveloped the house, the temperature dropped, and my breath became visible in the air. The darkness seemed to press against the windows, trying to seep through any crack it could find. I lit a fire in the hearth, hoping to ward off the cold and the creeping dread that came with it. I decided to confront the scholar's spirit, to demand answers. Using the remaining shard of the mirror, I called out to him. His apparition flickered into existence, his face contorted with fear. "They are the Watchers," he whispered. "Guardians of the threshold between worlds. You must close the gateway, or they will consume your soul." The task seemed impossible. The symbols were a language of power, one that I barely understood. But as the scholar's spirit dissipated, I realized that the answer lay within the house itself. The Victorian architecture, the ornate carvings, and the very foundation, it was all part of a larger ritual circle, one that the scholar had unwittingly completed. I raced against time, deciphering the scholar's notes and aligning the house's features with the symbols. The hum grew louder, and the shadows danced with frenetic energy. I could feel the Watchers' impatience, their hunger. It was now or never. With the final symbol in place, I recited the incantation. A surge of power rippled through the house, and the symbols blazed with light. The hum turned into a shriek as the gateway began to close. But just as the light reached its peak, a hand, a claw, reached through the mirror, its fingers inches from my face. The light exploded, sending shards of glass and energy throughout the room. When the chaos settled, the house was silent once more. The gateway was closed, the Watchers gone. But the cost of my victory was clear. In the mirror's reflection, my eyes were no longer my own. They were the eyes of the abyss, filled with the knowledge and horror of what lay beyond. The scratching may have stopped, but now, every night, I hear the sound of my own voice, whispering secrets from the other side of the wall. Story 4. The Unseen Portal. I remember the day the letter arrived, nondescript and unassuming, but it carried an air of silent foreboding. It was addressed to me, yet the sender's details were conspicuously absent. Inside, a single photograph lay flat, a door, old and weathered, its paint peeling to reveal the ancient wood beneath. It was a door I had never seen before, and yet, it beckoned me with an eerie familiarity. Days passed, and each time I glanced at the photo, a chill ran down my spine. The door, once a mere image, seemed to inch closer with every look. The background, previously a blur, now revealed more details, a decrepit building, windows like hollow eyes, and a sense of desolation that seemed almost palpable. I tried to dismiss it as a trick of the mind, but the photograph had other plans. It began to appear in my dreams, each time the door opening slightly wider, revealing only darkness beyond. The air around the photo grew colder, and a faint, almost inaudible whisper seemed to emanate from it when the house was silent. The whispers grew into murmurs, forming words I couldn't understand. I found myself drawn to the photo, my nights consumed by the need to decipher its message. The door now stood ajar in the image, an invitation or a warning, I couldn't tell. One night, as the murmurs swelled into a cacophony, I saw it, a figure in the photograph, standing by the door. It was shadowy and indistinct, but its presence was undeniable. It seemed to stare right at me, through me, as if it knew me. The next morning, I woke up to find the photograph gone. In its place, a new letter with no photograph, only a message, "Come find me. Through the threshold, you'll see." The handwriting was mine, but I had no recollection of writing it. As I sit here, penning this account, the air grows colder, and the whispers return. I can feel the door, though unseen, is closer than ever. It's calling me, and I fear I may answer. The whispers didn't cease, they grew into a symphony of silent screams that only I could hear. I felt the pull of the unseen door, its presence now a constant in my life. It was as if the photograph had imprinted itself onto my very soul, its image burned into my retinas. I began to see the door everywhere, in reflections, shadows, and the edges of my vision. It was never fully materialized, always elusive, yet unmistakably there. The figure from the photograph haunted me too, a specter that followed me in my waking hours and invaded my dreams. My research into the building in the background of the photo led me nowhere. It was as if it didn't exist, yet it stood there in the picture, as real as the fear that gripped me. The more I searched, the more I felt the door's proximity, an invisible force tugging at the edges of reality. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I heard a knock. 3 slow, deliberate thuds that resonated with an otherworldly echo. I opened my front door to find nothing but the chilling embrace of the night air. But when I turned around, there it was, the door from the photograph, now a part of my home. I approached it, each step heavy with dread. The whispers grew louder, urging me forward. My hand reached for the knob, cold and unyielding, and as I turned it, the door creaked open to reveal a darkness so profound it seemed to swallow the light. The figure stood in the threshold, its form clearer now. It was human, or had been once. Its eyes, hollow and endless, stared into mine, and I heard its voice, a whisper that caught through the silence, "You found me." I stepped through the door, and the world I knew fell away. I was in the building from the photograph, the air thick with the scent of decay. The whispers were all around me, and I realized they were voices, each telling their own tale of sorrow. The building's interior was a labyrinth of decay, each room a snapshot of lives once lived. The voices grew louder, their echoes bouncing off the peeling walls, telling stories of joy and pain, love and loss. It was as if the building itself was alive, breathing through the whispers of its former inhabitants. I navigated the dim corridors, the figure from the door now my silent guide. It led me deeper into the heart of the structure, where the air was heavy with a sense of anticipation. The whispers converged into a single voice, one that spoke directly to me, "You are home." The realization struck me like a bolt of lightning. This place, this forgotten edifice, was not just a building, it was a repository of memories, and I was connected to it in ways I couldn't comprehend. The photograph, the door, they were all part of me. My guide stopped before a room, its door unlike the others, newer, less worn. It opened without a sound, revealing a space that was starkly out of place. It was my childhood bedroom, recreated down to the smallest detail. The whispers fell silent, and I was alone with my thoughts. There, on the bed, was another photograph. It showed the building as it once was, vibrant and full of life. And there I was, a child, smiling back at the camera. But how could this be? I had no memory of this place. As I looked up, the walls began to shift, the room melting away to reveal a hidden truth. The building, the door, the figure, they were all fragments of my own mind, a manifestation of forgotten traumas and buried fears. The figure reappeared, its form clearer now, a mirror image of myself. "You must remember," it whispered. And with those words, the walls crumbled, the building faded, and I was left standing in an empty field, the ruins of the structure at my feet. Story 5. Whispers of the Absent. I always found comfort in the predictable patterns of our life. The way the morning light danced through the curtains, the sound of the kettle signaling the start of a new day, and the reassuring cadence of my husband's voice as he'd call to say he'd be home soon. But that day, something was off. His voice on the phone sounded distant, distorted, almost as if it was being dragged through static. "I'll be home soon," he said, but the warmth I was accustomed to was missing. The hours ticked by, each minute stretching longer than the last. The house felt colder, the shadows in the corners darker, and the silence louder. When the door finally creaked open, relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. He stood there, in the doorway, his figure outlined by the dying light of dusk. His eyes, once vibrant and full of life, were now hollow, devoid of the spark that I loved. "Dinner's almost ready," I said, attempting to mask my growing unease. He didn't respond, just walked past me, his footsteps echoing against the hardwood floor. At the dinner table, he ate in silence, his movements mechanical, alien. I tried to engage him in conversation, to break through the invisible barrier that had formed, but his replies were curt, his voice a stranger's. That night, as we lay in bed, the distance between us was palpable. The man I had married seemed to have been replaced by an imposter, a shell with the same face but none of the essence. I listened to his breathing, even that sounded different, ragged and uneven. Sleep eluded me, and the darkness of the room felt oppressive, suffocating. In the early hours of the morning, I awoke to a whisper. At first, I thought it was a dream, but then I heard it again, clearer, closer. It was coming from him, or at least, the entity that resembled him. The words were indecipherable, a language I couldn't understand, but the tone was pleading, desperate. The next day, I followed him. I needed answers. He walked the streets like a man on a mission, yet his destination was unknown. He stopped in front of an old, decrepit house, its windows boarded, its history forgotten. He stood there for what felt like hours, just staring. I wanted to call out to him, to ask what he was doing, but fear rooted me to the spot. As the sun began to set, he turned and walked away, leaving the house and its secrets behind. I knew then that whatever had happened to him, whatever had taken hold of him, was connected to that place. And I was determined to uncover the truth, no matter how terrifying it might be. The morning after my unsettling discovery, I resolved to visit the forsaken house that had captivated my husband's attention. The daylight did little to dispel the gloom that clung to the dilapidated structure. As I approached, a shiver ran down my spine, not from the chill in the air, but from the sense of dread that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the house. I hesitated at the threshold, the door hanging ajar as if inviting me into its dark maw. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and the silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional creak of the old floorboards under my tentative steps. The house felt alive, watching me with unseen eyes, whispering secrets I wasn't sure I wanted to hear. In the living room, the remnants of a life once lived lay scattered, a broken picture frame, a faded armchair, a child's toy left forgotten. Each object seemed to hold a piece of the story, a fragment of the tragedy that had unfolded within these walls. I could almost hear the echoes of laughter and tears, the remnants of joy and sorrow intertwined. As I ascended the staircase, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. They were no longer just sounds, but voices, pleading, warning, beckoning. I reached the top and found myself drawn to a door at the end of the hallway. It was different from the others, its wood darker, its surface etched with strange symbols that made my head ache to look at them. I pushed the door open, and the voices fell silent. The room was shrouded in shadows, the curtains drawn tight against the intrusion of light. And there, in the center of the room, stood a telephone, its cord twisted, its receiver off the hook. It was an anachronism in this abandoned place, and yet it seemed to be waiting, expectant. I reached out, my hand trembling, and lifted the receiver to my ear. Static filled the line, a cacophony of noise that made me wince. But then, amidst the chaos, I heard it, a voice, my husband's voice, but distorted, as if filtered through a lens of pain and fear. "Leave, now," it warned, before the line went dead. Panic seized me, and I fled the room, the house, the whispers chasing me as I ran. I didn't stop until I was back in the safety of my own home. But as I locked the door behind me, I realized the whispers had followed me, and they were growing louder. I was no longer the hunter, I had become the prey. The whispers were no longer confined to the shadows of the night, they had seeped into the daylight, into the very walls of my home. I could hear them, a constant murmur, like a crowd of unseen spectators watching my every move. My husband, or the entity that wore his face, moved through the house like a ghost, his presence an eerie reminder of the man he once was. I decided to confront the whispers. I sat in the living room, the epicenter of the murmurs, and spoke aloud. "What do you want from me?" I demanded. The whispers paused, and then, in a chilling unison, they answered, "We want to be heard." The air grew colder, and I felt a pressure in the room, as if the atmosphere itself was closing in on me. The whispers began to take shape, forming words, sentences, stories of lives once lived and lost. They spoke of love, betrayal, pain, and longing. Each voice was distinct, yet they were all bound by a common thread of regret. They were the souls of those who had passed through the house, each leaving behind a fragment of their essence. As I listened, the story of the house began to unfold. It was a place of passage, a threshold between worlds where spirits lingered, unable to move on. My husband had been ensnared by their plight, drawn into their limbo. The whispers needed a vessel, and he had become their unwitting host. Determined to free him, I scoured the house for anything that could break the connection. In the attic, hidden beneath layers of dust, I found an old journal. Its pages were filled with the ramblings of a previous occupant, a medium who had opened the door to the other side and never managed to close it. The medium had left instructions, a ritual that could sever the ties that bound the spirits to this world. It required a sacrifice, something of personal value. I knew what I had to do. I took my wedding ring, the symbol of the love that bound me to my husband, and prepared to perform the ritual. As I chanted the words written in the journal, the house shook, the whispers grew louder, and a wind whipped through the rooms, tearing at the curtains, rattling the windows. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. The silence returned, but it was different now, peaceful. I turned to see my husband, his eyes clear, the fog that had clouded them lifted. "You saved me," he whispered, his voice his own again. But as we embraced, I realized the cost. The ring was gone, and with it, a part of our past. We were free from the whispers, but at what price? The house still stands, a silent sentinel. But sometimes, in the dead of night, I can hear them, the faintest echo of whispers, calling me back to the house. Story 6. Grandma's Presence. I had never believed in ghosts. The very idea seemed like something out of a child's storybook, meant to frighten and entertain. Yet, here I was, standing at the foot of the attic stairs, the echo of my daughter's voice still ringing in my ears. It was late, well past midnight, and the house was shrouded in an uneasy silence. "Come up, Daddy," her voice beckoned again, a chilling sing-song that seemed to seep through the floorboards. My wife, Sarah, had been convinced for weeks that our little Emma was communicating with her deceased grandmother. I had dismissed it as a child's imagination run wild, until now. With each step I took, the air grew colder, and the darkness seemed to press against me. The attic was a place of forgotten things, a graveyard for family relics covered in sheets of time. As I reached the top, I saw her, Emma, sitting in the center of the room, a dusty old phone receiver in her hand. "She wants to talk to you," Emma whispered, offering me the phone with a solemn expression. My heart raced as I took it, half expecting to hear nothing but the static of a deadline. Instead, a familiar voice spoke, warm yet distant. "It's been so long, my dear." The conversation that followed was impossible. Questions and answers flowed, things only her grandmother could know, secrets from my childhood, words from private moments long past. I hung up, my mind reeling, and turned to Emma, who smiled knowingly. "Grandma says she's watching over us," she said, her eyes reflecting an otherworldly glow. "She's always here, in the attic, waiting." The implication of her words sent a shiver down my spine. How could this be? Was it truly her spirit, or something more sinister masquerading in her guise? As I pondered, a sudden gust of wind blew through the attic, extinguishing the candle I had brought. In the darkness, I heard the creak of the old rocking chair, a sound that had not been heard since Grandma passed. And then, a soft, eerie lullaby filled the room, a tune that only she had sung to Emma. The lullaby ceased as abruptly as it had begun, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. My eyes had adjusted to the darkness, and I could make out Emma's silhouette, still as a statue. "Did you hear it too, Daddy?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, unable to find my voice. The air felt thick, charged with an energy I couldn't explain. I wanted to grab Emma and flee, but my legs refused to move. "She's here," Emma said, her voice tinged with a mix of fear and awe. Questions raced through my mind. Was this really happening? Was it possible that Sarah had been right all along? The thought was both comforting and terrifying. Comforting because it meant that Sarah's mother, the woman who had been a second mother to me, was still with us. Terrifying because it defied all logic. I reached out to touch Emma's shoulder, and she turned to face me. Her eyes, usually so full of life, were now pools of darkness. "She's waiting for you to believe," Emma said, her hand pointing to the corner of the attic where an old chest lay. As I approached the chest, a sense of dread washed over me. The chest had belonged to Sarah's mother, and we had never dared to open it since her passing. With trembling hands, I lifted the lid, and a gust of wind rushed out, scattering old photographs and letters around the attic. Among the scattered memories, one photo caught my eye. It was a picture of Sarah's mother holding a much younger Emma, both smiling at the camera. But behind them, in the shadows, there was a figure I had never seen before, a figure that seemed to stare back at me from the photo. The temperature dropped, and I could see my breath in the air. A voice, soft and rasping, filled the room. "You must believe to see," it said. And then, the attic light flickered on, revealing the figure from the photo standing right before us. The figure stood motionless, a silent sentinel from a realm beyond our own. Its eyes, hollow and unseeing, were fixed upon me, as if peering into the very depths of my soul. Emma clung to my side, her small hand gripping mine with a strength that belied her years. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice steady despite the fear that clawed at my insides. The figure's lips moved, but the words that came were not its own. They were Sarah's mother's, imbued with a warmth that I remembered all too well. "I am a guardian," the voice said, watching over my family from the shadows. The room grew colder still, and the figure began to fade, its edges blurring into the darkness of the attic. I struggled to understand, to accept the reality that was unfolding before me. "Why reveal yourself now?" I asked, desperate for answers. The voice sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of years. "Because you are in danger," it said, and the air around us seemed to vibrate with urgency. "There's a presence in this house, one that means to harm you and little Emma." My heart raced, and I held Emma closer. "What presence? What danger?" I pressed, but the figure had become little more than a wisp of smoke. "Beware the whispers," it warned, "for they seek to deceive and destroy." And with that, the figure vanished, leaving us alone in the attic once more. The silence was oppressive, and I could feel Emma trembling against me. We needed to leave, to escape the attic and its secrets. But as we turned to go, the door slammed shut with a force that shook the walls. A new voice, malicious and cruel, echoed through the room. "You cannot leave," it hissed, "for you belong to the house now." Panic set in, and I rushed to the door, pounding on it with all my might. Story 7. The Empty Bed. I awoke to an unsettling silence, the kind that screams louder than any noise. The other side of the bed was cold, untouched since last night. My wife, Eliza, was gone. Her phone lay on the nightstand, a single voicemail playing on a loop, "Help me, please," in her unmistakable voice. I sat up, heart pounding, as the recording echoed in the dimly lit room. The house felt different, as if the shadows held secrets they weren't telling. I called out for Eliza, but only my voice returned to me, sounding foreign in the stillness. I checked every room, growing more frantic with each empty space. The silence was suffocating, pressing in on me with the weight of the unknown. Returning to our bedroom, I noticed something odd, a faint, sweet scent in the air, like jasmine, Eliza's favorite. It was out of place, a sensory contradiction to the fear that was setting into my bones. I followed the scent trail, which led me to the basement door, slightly ajar. That's when I heard it, a soft whisper, barely audible, calling my name. The basement was a place we seldom ventured, a storage for memories and things we chose to forget. As I descended the creaky stairs, the temperature dropped, and my breath became visible in the air. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices that weren't Eliza's. They were beckoning me, pulling me deeper into the darkness. I found an old tape recorder on a dusty shelf, its reels spinning, playing the same plea for help. The room spun as I realized the voice wasn't coming from the phone, it was emanating from the recorder. I reached out to stop it, but my hand froze inches away, an invisible force holding me back. The whispers turned into laughter, a sound so chilling it could freeze blood. Shadows danced along the walls, forming shapes that were almost human. I felt eyes on me, watching, waiting. I stumbled back upstairs, the laughter following me, a sound that promised I wasn't alone. As I reached the top, the door slammed shut behind me, and the house plunged into darkness. The laughter stopped, replaced by a single, drawn-out whisper, "Stay with us." The air grew colder, and I knew this was only the beginning. The darkness was absolute, a void where even the concept of light seemed a distant memory. My heart raced as I fumbled for the switch, but the laughter had rendered me blind in my own home. "Eliza!" I cried out, but it was a whisper against the storm of voices that now filled the room. I stumbled through the house, each step guided by instinct rather than sight. The air was thick with that jasmine scent, now mixed with something metallic, like blood. I reached the living room, where the faint glow of the streetlights cast ghostly shadows through the windows. That's when I saw it, a figure, silhouetted against the pale light, standing just outside the glass. It was Eliza, or at least, it bore her shape. But something was wrong. Her eyes were hollow, her expression twisted in a silent scream. I stepped closer, my breath fogging the glass, and she vanished, leaving me alone with the night. The phone rang, jolting me from the trance. I answered, and Eliza's voice came through, distant and distorted. "I'm here, but not here," she said. "Find me before it's too late." The line went dead, and the room spun with a vertigo that defied logic. I needed answers. I scoured Eliza's belongings, searching for any clue that could explain her disappearance and these haunting events. In her diary, I found entries that spoke of dreams, visions of another place, a realm where spirits lingered, trapped between worlds. As I read her words, the temperature dropped again, and I felt a presence behind me. I turned to find the room empty, but the sensation of being watched was overwhelming. The whispers returned, now clear and commanding. "Look closer," they urged. I obeyed, drawn to a loose floorboard beneath the rug. As I pried it open, a chill ran up my spine. Inside was a collection of old photographs, pictures of Eliza with people I didn't recognize, all of them with the same hollow eyes. And among them, a map, marked with a location I knew all too well, the old cemetery on the outskirts of town. The whispers guided me through the night, a symphony of voices that seemed to know the way better than I did. The cemetery gates loomed ahead, iron-wrought and twisted, like the fingers of the dead reaching out from their graves. I pushed them open, the sound of metal on metal cutting through the silence. Inside, the moon cast an eerie glow over the tombstones, each one a sentinel standing guard over the long-forgotten. I walked among them, the map clutched in my hand, leading me to an unmarked grave at the far end of the cemetery. The ground here was freshly turned, a stark contrast to the weathered stones around it. I began to dig, the earth yielding to my shovel with every desperate thrust. The whispers grew louder, urging me on, until my shovel hit something solid. A casket. My hands trembled as I cleared the dirt, revealing its aged wood, and with a deep breath, I opened it. To my horror, it was empty. No, not empty. There was something etched into the lid from the inside, a message written in frantic scratches: "Find the truth beneath the lies." The whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar, and the ground beneath me gave way. I fell into darkness, a void that swallowed me whole. When I landed, it was not on solid ground, but a room lit by a single flickering candle. Eliza was there, her eyes wide with fear and relief. "You found me," she whispered, but her voice was drowned out by the others. The room was filled with spirits, each one trapped in their own torment, their eyes pleading for release. Eliza explained, her voice barely audible over the din, "This place, it's a prison for souls. They can't leave, and now, neither can we." The realization hit me like a physical blow. We were trapped, bound to this place as surely as the spirits that surrounded us. The whispers turned into wails, a lament for the living caught in the realm of the dead. And then, the candle flickered one last time and went out, plunging us into an abyss from which there was no escape. Story 8. Echoes of Absence. I always believed our house held secrets, but nothing prepared me for the night when the walls themselves began to whisper. It started with a phone call from my husband, his voice distant and hollow, promising he'd be home soon. Yet, as I hung up, a chill ran down my spine. His voice, unmistakable and clear, echoed again, but this time from the closet. The house was old, the kind where every creak and groan told stories of decades past. We had moved in, seeking a fresh start, away from the bustling city life. But as I approached the closet, the air grew colder, and the silence, heavier. I reached for the handle, my heart pounding against my chest, and flung the door open. nothing but darkness greeted me. I called out, "Is someone there?" No answer. I flicked on the light, half expecting to see my husband hiding, ready to laugh at the prank he pulled. But the closet was empty, save for the coats and boxes we had yet to unpack. I convinced myself it was just my imagination, a trick of the mind fueled by the loneliness of the empty house. That night, as I lay in bed waiting for my husband, the silence was broken by a faint whisper. It was his voice again, calling my name, so soft it was almost a sigh. I searched the room, turning on every light, but found no one. The whispers seemed to seep through the walls, enveloping me in a cold embrace. The next day, my husband returned, and I told him about the voices. He laughed it off, attributing it to stress and fatigue. But as the days passed, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. They called to me, not just my husband's voice now, but others, voices I didn't recognize, all begging for something I couldn't understand. I started to research the history of the house, desperate for answers. What I found chilled me to the bone. The house had been the site of a tragedy long ago, a family lost to a fire, their cries for help unheard. Were these the voices that now reached out from beyond? As the sun set, the whispers returned, a cacophony of desperation and sorrow. I couldn't ignore them any longer. I had to find the source, to uncover the truth hidden within these walls. And so, I ventured into the darkness of the house, following the echoes of those long gone. The whispers guided me through the darkened corridors, a symphony of hushed tones that seemed to emanate from the very soul of the house. With each step, the voices grew clearer, and I could almost feel the presence of those who once called this place home. The air was thick with the scent of old wood and whispered secrets. In the library, the whispers swirled around me like a silent storm. Books lay scattered, their pages fluttering as if caught in a breeze that didn't exist. "Who are you?" I asked the empty room. The response came not in words, but in a sudden drop in temperature and the soft sound of a child's giggle. I followed the laughter to the fireplace, where a faded photograph lay on the mantel. A family, smiling, their eyes filled with hope. As I touched the frame, the voices crescendoed, and the room spun. The family's faces twisted in terror, their eyes now pleading. I dropped the photo, and the room stilled, the silence suffocating. That night, I couldn't sleep. The whispers had names now, calling out to me, begging me to listen. I heard the mother's sobs, the father's desperate pleas, the children's cries cut short. They were trapped, their spirits bound to the house, their stories untold. I decided to confront the voices. "What do you want from me?" I demanded. The answer came in a cold breath on my neck and a single word whispered so close it felt like a kiss: freedom. The days blurred into one another as I searched for a way to help these lost souls. I scoured ancient texts and consulted mediums, each one more eccentric than the last. They spoke of rituals and offerings, of gates between worlds that could be opened, but at a cost. As the moon rose on the night of the ritual, I prepared to face the unknown. The house groaned in protest, the walls themselves alive with anticipation. I began the incantation, the words foreign on my tongue, and the air crackled with energy. Shadows danced at the edge of my vision, the spirits gathering, their whispers now deafening. I reached the climax of the ritual, the moment of release. The house shook, the walls bleeding shadows, the voices reaching a crescendo. And then, silence. But as I looked around, triumphant, I realized I was not alone. A figure stood in the doorway, its eyes hollow, its smile wide and terrifying. It was my husband, but not as I knew him. The figure before me, wearing my husband's face, was a grotesque mockery of the man I loved. Its eyes, devoid of warmth, watched me with a hunger that twisted my stomach. "You're not him," I whispered, my voice barely carrying across the room. "You're right," it replied, its voice a distorted echo of my husband's. "But I am because of him. We are the hollow ones, the souls you freed, but we are changed." The air grew thick with malice, and I knew I had made a terrible mistake. The whispers had ceased, replaced by the tangible presence of these hollow ones. They filled the house, their forms flickering in and out of existence like faulty projections. I realized then that the ritual hadn't freed them, it had unleashed them into our world. I backed away, my mind racing for a solution. The house was no longer a sanctuary but a prison. The Hollow Ones advanced, their movements jerky and unnatural. "What do you want?" I demanded, my back hitting the cold wall. "We want life," the figure with my husband's face hissed. "The life we were denied, the warmth we crave. You will give it to us." Panic set in as I felt their cold fingers brush against my skin, the life seeping out of me with every touch. In a desperate bid for survival, I remembered the photograph, the family that once lived here. I darted towards the fireplace, grabbing the frame. "You were once them," I shouted, holding the photo out like a shield. "Remember who you were." For a moment, the Hollow Ones paused, their forms flickering more violently. The house shook as if it were about to collapse, the very foundation groaning under the weight of their turmoil. And then, silence. The Hollow Ones vanished, leaving me alone in the darkness. I collapsed to the floor, the photograph clutched in my trembling hands. The house was silent, too silent. I had stopped the Hollow Ones, but at what cost? As I sat there, trying to comprehend what had happened, a new whisper caressed my ear, one that froze my blood. "Thank you," it said, not with malice, but with a sorrow that was all too human. It was my husband's true voice, and it was coming from the closet. I turned slowly, dread filling me as I faced the door. What would I find this time? Story 9. The Midnight Message. I had always been a light sleeper, but that night, the silence of my room felt oppressive, like the calm before a storm. My phone buzzed, slicing through the stillness, and I squinted at the screen. The message was from my own number, a photo attached. It was me, asleep in bed. Confusion turned to horror as I noticed the dark figure looming in the corner, its outline barely discernible. The air grew colder, and the shadows in my room seemed to stretch towards me. I tried to convince myself it was a sick prank, but the figure in the photo was unnervingly detailed, its eyes glinting with malice. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was more than just a picture, it was a warning. I searched my room, every corner, under the bed, behind curtains, but found nothing. The digital clock read 3:07 a.m., the witching hour, and I couldn't help but feel watched. The figure had no face, no features that I could distinguish, yet I felt its gaze, heavy and intent. The following days were a blur of paranoia. I jumped at shadows, flinched at every notification. My phone became a source of dread, each buzz a potential harbinger of doom. Friends and family said I looked drained, asked if I was sick, but how could I explain the unexplainable? Then came the second message, another photo. This time the figure was closer, its hand reaching out towards the sleeping form of me. I wasn't safe, not even in my own sanctuary. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. It was getting closer, and I was running out of time. I decided to stay awake, to confront whatever this thing was. As the night deepened, so did the darkness in my room, and I felt the familiar buzz of my phone. With trembling hands, I picked it up, the screen illuminating a new message, "Look behind you." I turned slowly, every horror story I'd ever heard flashing through my mind. There, in the corner, stood the figure, a dark echo of the photo, and as our eyes met, I understood. This wasn't just a ghost, it was a harbinger of my own fears, a manifestation of the darkness within me. The figure before me was a void, an absence of light that seemed to swallow the very air around it. Its presence was suffocating, and I could feel the icy tendrils of fear creeping up my spine. "What do you want?" I managed to choke out, my voice barely a whisper. It didn't speak, but the room filled with an army of whispers, as if 1,000 voices were speaking at once, all of them just beyond my understanding. The figure pointed at me, and I felt an invisible force grip my heart. It was a message, clear and terrifying. I was marked. I spent the next day researching, poring over ancient texts and online forums, desperate for answers. The figure matched no known entity, but the recurring theme was clear. It was a harbinger of something far worse to come. That night, I set up cameras, hoping to catch a glimpse of the truth. As darkness fell, the whispers returned, louder, more insistent. I watched the footage, my breath catching as the figure materialized on screen, its form clearer, more defined. It was no longer just a shadow, it had substance, and it was here for me. I tried to reach out to others who had experienced similar phenomena, but their stories ended abruptly, their fates unknown. I was alone in this, the protagonist of a horror story that had no end in sight. The third message arrived, a video this time. It showed me, sitting in the room, the figure behind me, its hand on my shoulder. But the most terrifying part was my own expression, smiling, as if I was enjoying the company of an old friend. As I watched, paralyzed with fear, the figure in the video turned its head, looking directly at me through the screen. Its mouth moved, and though no sound came out, I understood the message, soon. The video had ended, but its echo haunted me. The figure's silent message, soon, reverberated through my mind, a sinister promise that clung to me like a shadow. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, I was trapped in a waking nightmare, the protagonist of a story that seemed to have no escape. I scoured my memories, trying to find the origin of this terror. Had I invited it in unknowingly? Was it a punishment for some forgotten sin? The figure was a mystery, an enigma wrapped in darkness, but it felt familiar, like a distorted reflection of myself. The whispers grew louder each night, a symphony of dread that filled my room. I could feel the figure's presence even when I couldn't see it, a constant companion in my solitude. It was toying with me, enjoying the slow unraveling of my sanity. On the fourth night, I received no message, no photo, no video. Instead, the figure appeared in my room, tangible and terrifyingly real. It reached out, and I felt compelled to take its hand. The touch was ice, a chill that spread through my body, and in that moment, I understood, it was a part of me, a manifestation of my deepest fears. I looked into its faceless visage and saw my own eyes staring back. The realization hit me like a wave, the figure was not just a ghost or a demon. It was the embodiment of my own darkness, a creature born from the recesses of my psyche. The whispers stopped, and the figure's hand tightened around mine. It leaned in, and I heard its voice for the first time, a whisper that was both alien and intimately familiar. "It's time," it said, and I felt a pull, a call to join it in the shadows. I stood at the precipice of understanding, the boundary between light and dark. The figure was a part of me, and I had to make a choice. Embrace the darkness or fight for the light within. Story 10. The Forgotten Figure. I always believed my childhood was ordinary, unblemished by the peculiar or the uncanny. That belief shattered the day I found the photograph. It was tucked away behind old clothes and forgotten board games, in a box labeled memories. The image was of my 7th birthday party, a sunny day in our backyard. I remembered the cake, the laughter, the games. But not him, the figure in the shadows. The figure was barely discernible, a smudge against the fence, but undeniably human-shaped. I squinted, trying to recall a forgotten guest, a late arrival perhaps. But memory offered no clues, only a growing unease. The more I stared, the more the figure seemed to stare back, its features obscured, but its presence unsettlingly focused. I asked my parents about the party, about anyone who might have been lurking uninvited. They exchanged puzzled glances, their brows furrowed in concern. "We knew everyone there," my mother said, her voice tinged with worry. "And we would never let a stranger near you kids." My father's agreement was silent but firm, his nod resolute. That night, sleep was elusive. The photograph lay on my nightstand, face down, yet I could feel its presence, like eyes on my back. In the darkness, every creak and groan of the house was a step, every shadow a figure. I was a child again, afraid of the monster under the bed, except the monster was in a picture, and it was real. The following days were a blur of research and dead ends. I scoured yearbooks, social media, public records, anything that might reveal the identity of the figure. But it was as if they didn't exist, except in that single, haunting image. The figure became my obsession, the mystery consuming my thoughts, my dreams. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across my room, I heard it, a whisper, barely audible, like leaves rustling. "Find me," it said, and the temperature dropped, breath visible in the air. I spun around, heart racing, but there was nothing, no one. The whisper came again, a plea, a command, from everywhere and nowhere. I knew then that the figure was not just a forgotten guest or a trick of the light. It was something else, something that defied explanation. And it was calling to me, from the shadows, from the past. I had to find out why. The whispers didn't stop. They followed me like a shadow, always just out of reach, a murmur in the silence. I tried to ignore them, to focus on the mundane tasks of life, but they were persistent, an undercurrent to every moment. Find me, they said, a mantra that echoed in the hollows of my mind. I returned to the photograph, studying it under different lights, at different angles. The figure remained unchanged, a sentinel in the background. But now, I noticed something else, a faint outline of something in its hand. Was it a clue? A message? The whispers grew louder, urging me on. My investigation led me to the local library, to dusty archives and yellowed newspapers. I pored over articles, obituaries, anything that might hold a key to the figure's identity. Hours turned into days, and the librarians began to give me curious looks, but I was undeterred. Then, I found it, a small article, tucked away on the back page of an old newspaper. It spoke of a disappearance, a child who had gone missing decades ago, on the very day of my birthday party. The child's name was unimportant, it was the photo that accompanied the article that stole my breath. There, in the background, was the same figure, the same shadowy outline. I felt a chill run down my spine as the whispers crescendoed into a cacophony. "You're close," they hissed, and I shuddered. The library's lights flickered, and for a moment, I thought I saw a shadow move. I was no longer alone. That night, the whispers became voices, distinct and clear. They spoke of secrets, of hidden truths, of a story that needed to be told. They spoke of the figure, of its ties to me, of a bond forged in darkness and silence. I listened, and I understood. The figure was not just a bystander, it was a guardian, a watcher, a keeper of the past. As dawn broke, I knew what I had to do. The figure had chosen me, had led me to this moment. It was time to confront the past, to uncover the truth hidden in the shadows. I had to go back to where it all began, to the house I grew up in, to the backyard where the photograph was taken. The whispers guided me back to the old house, now derelict and shrouded in overgrowth. The once vibrant colors were faded, the laughter long silenced. I stepped into the backyard, the scene of the photograph, and felt a weight in the air, a charge that made my skin prickle. As I approached the spot where the figure had stood, the whispers grew urgent. "Here," they said, and I could almost feel a hand on my shoulder, a breath on my neck. I turned, half expecting to see someone, but there was only the empty yard and the ghosts of memories. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and called out, "I'm here. What do you want from me?" The air stilled, the whispers ceased, and for a moment, there was silence. Then, a voice, clear and resonant, spoke from the shadows. "Look closer." I opened my eyes and saw it, a faint outline on the fence, not a shadow, but a mark, a message. It was a name and a date, the same as the child who had disappeared. The realization hit me like a wave, the figure was him, the missing child, reaching out across time. The voice spoke again, "Find the truth. Share my story." It was a plea from beyond, a task entrusted to me. I nodded, understanding my role. I was to be the voice for the voiceless, the teller of untold tales. I spent the next days piecing together the story, the tragedy of a child forgotten, a life unlived. The more I uncovered, the more the shadows receded, the whispers softened. I wrote it all down, every detail, and when I was done, I felt a sense of completion, of release. That night, I dreamed of the backyard, of my birthday party, but this time, the figure was not lurking in the shadows. He was there, in the light, smiling, finally at peace. When I awoke, the photograph was gone, and in its place, a new image of the party, with all of us, and no shadows to be seen. The whispers were silent, the task complete, but the chill remained. For in the corner of the new photograph, barely visible, was another figure, another shadow, waiting to be found. Story 11. The Unseen Grip. I awoke to the unsettling silence of our bedroom, the kind that presses in on your eardrums and signals that something is amiss. The digital clock on the nightstand read 3:03 a.m., its crimson digits the only source of light. I reached out, expecting the warmth of my husband next to me, but found only the cool, untouched sheets of his side of the bed. A shiver ran down my spine, not from the chill in the air, but from the sudden realization that I was alone. I called out his name, my voice barely above a whisper, but there was no response. The house remained still, as if holding its breath. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, the wooden floorboards cold against my feet. That's when I felt it, a cold hand, firm and unmistakable, wrapping around mine from under the mattress. I recoiled in horror, my heart pounding against my ribcage. The hand didn't let go. It couldn't be my husband, this hand was icy and rigid. Panic set in as I tried to free myself, but the grip was too strong. I screamed, a sound that seemed to be swallowed by the darkness of the room. It was then that I heard the soft, dragging footsteps approaching from the hallway. My breath hitched. Was it my husband? Or something far worse? The door creaked open, revealing nothing but a deeper blackness beyond. The air grew colder, and I could see my breath forming misty clouds in front of me. I felt another hand, just as cold, brush against my ankle. I was frozen in place, terror rooting me to the spot. The room filled with a low, mournful wail that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. As the wailing grew louder, the hands pulled me, inch by inch, toward the edge of the bed. I fought against the unseen force, my nails digging into the mattress. Just as I was about to be dragged under, the room was flooded with light. The hands vanished, and I was left gasping for air, alone in the sudden silence. I stumbled to the light switch, my hands trembling. The room appeared normal, no sign of any intruder. But the window was open, the curtains billowing in the night breeze. I didn't remember opening it. I approached cautiously, peering into the darkness outside. That's when I saw it, a figure, standing in the garden, staring up at me with hollow eyes. The figure in the garden was motionless, its outline barely discernible in the moonlight. I couldn't make out the features, but the way it stood there, staring, sent a new wave of dread through me. I backed away from the window, my mind racing. Was this a prank? A burglar? Or something more sinister? I needed to call the police, but my phone was downstairs. I crept out of the bedroom, every creak of the floorboards sounding like a thunderclap in the silent house. As I descended the stairs, I felt the temperature drop with each step, the air growing thick with a sense of foreboding. The living room was shrouded in shadows, the furniture looming like specters in the dark. I fumbled for the light switch, but it wouldn't turn on. A soft, mocking laughter echoed around me, and I spun around, trying to locate the source. "Who's there?" I demanded, my voice stronger than I felt. No answer came, only the laughter, growing louder, more deranged. It was coming from everywhere and nowhere, bouncing off the walls, filling the room. I covered my ears, but it was no use. The laughter was inside my head, clawing at my sanity. I stumbled into the kitchen, the laughter following me. The moonlight streaming through the window cast long, twisted shadows across the floor. And then I saw them, footprints, wet and dark, leading from the back door to the basement. They weren't there before. I was sure of it. The basement door stood ajar, an inky darkness spilling out from the gap. The laughter stopped abruptly, replaced by a low, guttural growl that seemed to come from the depths below. I knew I should run, get out of the house, but something compelled me to approach the door. As I reached out to push it open, the growl intensified, and a cold wind rushed up from the basement, extinguishing the moonlight. I was plunged into darkness, the growl now a deafening roar in my ears. I braced myself for what was to come, but nothing could prepare me for the icy fingers that brushed against my neck. The touch on my neck was like a jolt of electricity, snapping me back to the grim reality of my darkened kitchen. I spun around, my hands flailing in the void, but there was nothing, no one. The growling had ceased, and the silence was once again complete, oppressive. I strained my ears, listening for any sign of movement, but there was only my ragged breathing. I fumbled in the darkness, searching for a weapon, anything. My hand closed around the handle of a frying pan. Clutching it like a shield, I edged toward the basement door. The air was colder now, a chill that seemed to seep into my bones. I could feel it, something lurking just beyond the threshold, waiting. With a deep breath, I pushed the door open and descended. The stairs groaned under my weight, each step a creaking protest. The basement was shrouded in an impenetrable darkness, a blackness that felt alive, watching. I held the pan out in front of me, my other hand trailing along the wall, searching for the light switch. A whisper slithered through the darkness, a hiss that made my skin crawl. "Leave," it breathed, the word hanging in the air, a suspended threat. I ignored it, pressing on, determined to face whatever horror awaited me. The whispers grew louder, a chorus of voices, all repeating that single command, "Leave." I found the switch and flicked it on, but the light was feeble, barely cutting through the gloom. Shadows danced along the walls, and for a moment, I thought I saw figures moving within them. I shook my head, trying to dispel the illusion, but they persisted, shifting, whispering. In the far corner of the basement, I spotted something, a shape huddled against the wall. I approached, my heart in my throat. It was my husband, or what was left of him. His eyes were wide, unseeing, his mouth agape in a silent scream. And then I saw the marks on his arms, the bruises shaped like hands. I reached out to him, but before I could touch him, the floor beneath me gave way. I was falling, the world spinning, the whispers turning into howls. I braced for impact, but it never came. Instead, I was suspended, the darkness enveloping me, the whispers now gentle, coaxing. "Join us," they murmured, and I felt hands, so many hands, pulling me deeper into the whispering void. Story 12. Whispers in the Grass. I had always found solace in the sprawling backyard of my childhood home, a place where the grass whispered secrets carried by the wind. But that tranquility shattered the day I unearthed an old, porcelain doll with glassy eyes that seemed to pierce through me. Its smile, a little too wide, sent shivers down my spine. I should have buried it again, but curiosity won over. Each night since its discovery, the doll appeared closer to the house, as if pulled by invisible strings. First, by the old oak tree, then, unsettlingly, on the back porch. I tried to dismiss it as a prank, but no one else had access to our property. Last night, it sat at the foot of my bed, its lips moving in a silent chant, whispering secrets only I knew, secrets from a childhood long buried in my memory. The following morning, I decided to confront it. As sunlight streamed through the windows, the doll sat motionless on the wooden floor. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. It remained silent, its presence an unspoken threat. I locked it in a trunk and slid it into the attic, hoping that would be the end. But as dusk fell, a cold dread settled over me. The house groaned under the weight of silence. Upstairs, the attic door creaked open on its own. I froze, listening as soft thuds echoed down the staircase. Thud, thud, thud. It was coming for me. I barricaded myself in my room, heart pounding against my ribs like a frantic drum. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices spilling my darkest fears. The door handle rattled violently, testing my resolve. I braced for the worst. Then, silence. A suffocating, heavy silence. I approached the door, hands trembling. As I reached for the knob, a child's giggle pierced the stillness, followed by the doll's voice, chillingly clear, "You can't hide from me." The night was a cloak of darkness as I lay in bed, the silence a stark contrast to the previous night's terror. I had convinced myself that the doll's whispers were a figment of my imagination, a trick of the mind fueled by childhood fears. But as the clock struck midnight, a faint murmur drifted through the air, a ghostly lullaby that grew louder with each passing second. I rose, following the sound to the attic. The trunk lay open, empty, save for a layer of dust where the doll had been. Panic gripped me as I searched frantically, but it was nowhere to be found. The whispers guided me back to my room, where I found the doll perched on my windowsill, its eyes reflecting the moonlight. "Why are you doing this?" I demanded, my voice laced with anger and fear. The doll tilted its head, and in a voice that was not its own, it spoke, "You unearthed me, now I unearth you." The room chilled as it recounted stories from my past, tales I had shared with no one. I grabbed the doll, determined to end this nightmare. I would bury it where it belonged, deep in the earth. But as I dug into the cold ground, the whispers turned to screams, and the doll's eyes glowed with a malevolent light. It was then I realized the doll was not just a vessel, it was a key to something ancient and forgotten. The ground shook as I placed the doll into the hole. A voice, older than time, echoed, "You cannot bury the truth." I filled the hole, but the earth spat it back out, the doll now standing upright, unmarked by the soil. I ran back to the house, locking every door, every window. But the whispers were inside my head now, relentless, driving me to the brink of madness. I could feel it moving closer, its porcelain hand reaching for me as I stumbled and fell. The whispers had ceased, replaced by an oppressive silence that hung over the house like a shroud. I sat in the darkness, my mind racing with the events of the past few nights. The doll, with its porcelain skin and lifeless eyes, had become my tormentor, revealing secrets and fears I thought were buried deep within me. As dawn broke, I resolved to uncover the truth behind the doll's power. I scoured the attic for any clue, any link to its origins. Hidden beneath old floorboards, I found a tattered diary, its pages yellowed with age. The entries were written by a young girl who once lived in this house, her words filled with loneliness and sorrow. She spoke of a doll, her only friend and confidant. The diary revealed a chilling tale of a family torn apart by tragedy, a father's descent into madness, and a mother's inconsolable grief. The girl had poured her soul into the doll, and in return, it whispered dark promises, promises of a companionship that would transcend death. I felt a cold breath on my neck as I read the last entry. The doll stood behind me, its presence no longer confined to the night. "You know now," it said, its voice a mix of the girl's and something far more ancient. "We are bound together, you and I." As night fell, the doll's whispers grew into a cacophony, each secret it revealed another chain binding me to it. I could feel its hold tightening, a noose around my neck. I had to break free. In a final act of defiance, I took the doll to the very heart of the backyard, to the oak tree where it all began. I would end this curse, even if it meant setting fire to the past. But as the flames licked at the doll's form, the sky darkened, and the earth trembled. The doll's laughter rang out, triumphant and terrifying, as it stepped unscathed from the fire, its eyes alight with infernal glee. Story 13. The Echoes of Midnight. Every night, as the clock chimes 12, a chilling silence descends upon my room. It's then that the whispers begin, soft and insidious, seeping through the cracks of my closet door. "Let us out," they plead, a chorus of desperation that claws at the edges of my sanity. I've tried to ignore them, to drown them out with music and mindless television, but they persist, relentless in their haunting refrain. I approach the closet, each step heavy with dread. The whispers grow louder, more fervent, as if sensing my proximity. My hand trembles as it reaches for the knob, the cold metal a stark contrast to the warmth of my palm. I fling the door open, and there it is, the mirror, its surface shimmering in the moonlight that filters through the window. But tonight, the reflection is different. It's me, but my eyes are hollow, my expression twisted in terror. The whispers stop abruptly, replaced by a single, resonant voice that echoes from the depths of the glass. "You see us now," it hisses, and I stumble backward, my heart racing. The room spins, and I collapse to the floor, the mirror's gaze bearing down upon me. It's then that I realize the whispers weren't begging to be let out, they were warning me. As I lie there, paralyzed by fear, the mirror begins to ripple, its surface undulating like the surface of a disturbed pond. Figures emerge, their forms blurred and shifting, reaching out with spectral hands. I want to scream, to run, but I'm trapped, a prisoner in my own body. The figures solidify, their features becoming clearer, and I recognize them, people I've known, loved, lost. They're different now, their eyes empty, their mouths gaping voids. They speak in unison, an army of voices that fills the room. You invited us in, they say, and I can feel their cold breath on my skin. I try to deny it, to tell them they're wrong, but the truth is etched into every corner of the room, into the very fabric of the mirror. I did this. I opened the door, night after night, and now they're here, a part of my world, a manifestation of my deepest fears. The clock strikes 1, and the figures retreat, their forms dissolving into the darkness. The whispers return, softer now, a haunting lullaby that lures me into a fitful sleep. I know they'll be back tomorrow, and the next day, and every night thereafter. They're a part of me now, the whispers in my closet, the echoes of midnight. The dawn brings no solace, for the whispers have seeped into the light. My home, once a sanctuary, now feels like a mausoleum, each room echoing with the memories of the night before. I avoid the mirror, its presence a constant reminder of the terror that lurks within its frame. But as the sun sets, my resolve crumbles, and I find myself drawn back to the closet, to the whispers that await. Tonight, they are different, urgent, demanding. Look at us, they implore. I can't resist their call. As I gaze into the mirror, the reflection shifts, revealing a scene from my past. It's my childhood home, the one that burned to the ground years ago, taking my family with it. The pain of the memory is palpable, a physical ache that grips my heart. Why are you showing me this? I whisper, but the mirror offers no reply, only the flickering image of flames that dance across its surface. I watch, helpless, as the scene plays out, the fire consuming everything I once loved. And then, amidst the inferno, I see them, my family, their faces twisted in agony. The whispers grow louder, a symphony of sorrow that fills the room. We are here because of you, they say, and I realize the truth in their words. It was my negligence, my forgetfulness that led to the fire, to their deaths. The guilt is a weight that I've carried, buried deep, but the mirror has unearthed it, laid it bare for me to see. I try to look away, but the figures in the mirror reach out, their hands pressing against the glass. It's as if they're trying to escape, to cross over into my world. I back away, my mind reeling with the implications. If they can come through, what else might follow? The room grows colder, the air thick with the scent of smoke and ash. I can hear the crackling of the fire, feel the heat on my skin. It's not just a reflection, it's a portal, a gateway to the past, and it's opening wider, the barrier between worlds growing thinner by the second. I must close the closet, must seal the mirror away, but my body refuses to obey. I'm rooted to the spot, a spectator to my own nightmare. The figures are clearer now, their expressions pleading. Help us, they beg, and I know I cannot. To help them would be to condemn myself, to open the door to a past I cannot change. The clock strikes 2, and the vision fades, the mirror returning to its normal state. But the whispers remain, a haunting melody that promises more revelations, more horrors to come. I'm trapped in a cycle of fear and regret, and the night is far from over. The whispers have grown into a cacophony, a relentless storm of voices that fills the night. They no longer plead or beg, they command, they insist. Face us, they demand, a directive that brooks no argument. I'm drawn to the closet, as if by an invisible thread, my will no longer my own. I open the door, and the mirror is waiting, its surface alive with movement. The reflection is a tableau of my life, each moment a shard of glass that cuts deep into my soul. I see myself, but not as I am. I'm fragmented, a puzzle of emotions and memories that refuse to fit together. The figures from the mirror step out, their forms solid and imposing. They surround me, their whispers now clear and articulate. You cannot hide from us, they say, their voices a chilling reminder of my inescapable guilt. We are you, they continue, and I understand, the whispers, the figures, they are manifestations of my own psyche, my regrets given form. I try to speak, to argue, but the words catch in my throat. The figures are right, I've been running from myself, from the truth of what happened. The fire, the loss, it was my doing, and these specters are the embodiment of that painful reality. The room shifts, the walls bending and warping as if the house itself is alive. I'm in the closet now, the figures outside, their hands pressed against the glass. They're not trying to get in, they're keeping me in. The mirror is a cell, and I'm the prisoner, locked away with my fears and my guilt. I pound on the glass, my fists bloody and raw, but it's no use. The figures watch, their expressions impassive. Accept us, they intone, and I realize that's what I must do. To silence the whispers, to end the haunting, I must accept the parts of myself I've tried to bury. The clock strikes 3, and the figures fade, their departure as silent as their arrival. The whispers quiet, a final breath that leaves the room empty, save for the mirror and me. I look into the glass one last time, and I see myself, whole, unbroken. The whispers were never in the closet, they were in me, a reminder of the past I must confront. But as I turn to leave, a new whisper caresses my ear, one that's not my own. You're not alone, it says, and a chill runs down my spine. I look back at the mirror, and in its depths, I see a new figure, one that's not a reflection of my guilt or my past. It's something else, something darker, and it's smiling. Story 14. The Absent Reflection. I had always felt the weight of her gaze, heavy and unblinking, from the house next door. The old woman, Mrs. Witherby, was a fixture at her window, her eyes following my every move. I never saw her outside, never saw her speak to anyone, she was just there, always watching. The day had been ordinary, filled with the mundane tasks of life. But as night fell, a chill crept into my bones, a premonition of something amiss. I tried to shake the feeling, attributing it to exhaustion, until I saw her, Mrs. Witherby, standing silently in the corner of my room. My heart raced, my breath caught in my throat. How did she get in? Why was she here? But the most disturbing question of all was why her reflection was not in the mirror that hung directly behind her. I wanted to scream, to run, but I was frozen, trapped in her silent scrutiny. She raised a finger to her lips, and I understood, she was beckoning me to keep quiet. But about what? What secrets did this silent sentinel hold? The air grew colder, and I could see my breath as I exhaled. Mrs. Witherby's eyes never left mine, and I felt an inexplicable pull towards her, a force beyond my control. As I stepped closer, the room around us seemed to warp, the walls bending inward, the very fabric of reality twisting. I was mere inches from her now, close enough to see the cataracts clouding her eyes. She reached out, her hand passing through the mirror without disturbing its surface. And then, with a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, she whispered, "They're coming." The silence was deafening, the darkness around us thick with unspoken words. Mrs. Witherby's presence filled the room, a tangible force that seemed to push against the very air. "Who's coming?" I managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. "The ones who watch," she replied, her voice a rasping echo. "The ones like me, but not kind. They've seen you now, through the window, through my eyes." A shiver ran down my spine as I processed her words. The Watchers? I had heard local legends, stories whispered by children and dismissed by adults. But here, in the presence of Mrs. Witherby, those tales took on a sinister reality. I glanced towards the window, half expecting to see a multitude of eyes peering in, but there was nothing, only the reflection of the room and the two of us, or rather, just me. Mrs. Witherby's image was still conspicuously absent. "Why me?" I asked, my curiosity overcoming my fear. "What do they want?" She moved closer, and I could feel the chill emanating from her. "You have a light inside you, one they crave but cannot touch. You must protect it, or they will extinguish it." The room began to spin, and I felt myself slipping into unconsciousness. Her words echoed in my mind as I fought to stay awake. "How can I protect myself?" I gasped. Mrs. Witherby's form began to fade, her voice a fading whisper, "Find the mirror that doesn't reflect, the path they cannot follow. Hurry, before." Her warning was cut off as darkness enveloped me, and I plunged into a void where whispers clawed at the edges of my sanity. I awoke with a start, the morning light harsh against my eyes. It had to have been a dream, a nightmare, but the chill in my bones told me otherwise. I woke to a world that felt altered, as if the very essence of reality had been shifted. The dream, if it was a dream, clung to me with visceral tenacity. Mrs. Witherby's words echoed in my head, "Find the mirror that doesn't reflect." My room, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage. The sunlight seemed dull, the shadows too deep. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, but when I turned to the window, it was empty. Mrs. Witherby was not there. Determined to unravel the mystery, I began searching for the mirror she spoke of. In the attic, amidst the relics of the past, I found it, a mirror, old and ornate, its surface dull and unreflective. As I gazed into the non-mirror, a sense of vertigo overcame me. The glass rippled like water, and I reached out, my hand passing through to another place. A cold wind brushed my skin, carrying whispers that were not my own. I stepped through, finding myself in a corridor lined with doors. Each door opened to a different scene, a different nightmare. I could feel the watchers now, their presence oppressive, their hunger palpable. I ran, the corridor never ending, the whispers growing louder. They were close, too close. I could almost feel their breath on my neck, their fingers grazing my back. Then, ahead, a door stood ajar, emitting a light so pure, so bright, it hurt to look at. I knew it was my only escape, my only hope. With the last of my strength, I pushed through the door and the light enveloped me, a warmth that felt like the embrace of the sun after a long, harsh winter. I blinked against the brilliance, and when my eyes adjusted, I found myself in a room that was both familiar and strange. It was my room, but not as I knew it. The walls were lined with mirrors, each reflecting a different version of myself. Some were older, some younger, but all had one thing in common: they were fighting, struggling against unseen forces. Story 15. The Smiling Spectre. I always found solace in the musty scent of old photographs, each a frozen moment from a time I yearned to visit. As a child, I'd spend hours in the attic, sifting through the sepia-toned memories of my family's past. But today, something was different. A chill ran down my spine as I noticed a figure lurking in the background of every photo. A figure that was always watching, always smiling, with eyes that seemed to follow me. The figure was an enigma, a specter that had woven itself into the tapestry of my family's history without ever being noticed. How could it be that no one had seen it before? Each picture told a story, and this figure was an unwanted character in every tale. It stood at the fringes of weddings, birthdays, even funerals, its grin wide and unchanging. I couldn't shake the feeling that the figure was more than just a trick of the light or a recurring coincidence. It was always there, in the same stance, with the same eerie smile. As I dug deeper into the pile of photographs, the figure seemed to grow closer, more defined, and I felt a presence in the room with me. The air grew colder, and the dim light of the attic seemed to flicker. I heard a whisper, a voice like the rustling of dry leaves, saying my name. I spun around, heart racing, but there was nothing, no one there. Yet, the sensation of being watched intensified. I decided to confront my grandmother about the figure. Her knowledge of our family history was encyclopedic, and surely she would have an explanation. But when I showed her the photos, her face turned pale, and she snatched them away, scolding me for digging up things best left buried. That night, I couldn't sleep. The figure haunted my dreams, always in the background, always smiling. In my dream, I turned to face it, but it vanished, leaving behind only the echo of its laughter and the words, "You shouldn't have looked." As dawn broke, I awoke with a start. The figure was no longer confined to the photographs. It was there, at the foot of my bed, its smile wider than ever. And then, it stepped forward. The figure had crossed a boundary, stepping out of the photographs and into my reality. Its presence was suffocating, like a fog that clung to my skin. I tried to ignore it, to convince myself that it was a mere hallucination, but the smile haunted me. It was a smile that promised secrets and whispered madness. I researched our family tree, desperate for answers. The figure appeared in daguerreotypes from the 1800s, in faded Kodachrome prints from the mid-20th century, and even in recent digital snapshots. It was as if time held no sway over this phantom. But who was it? A long-lost relative? A forgotten ancestor? My grandmother's health deteriorated rapidly. She muttered cryptic warnings, her eyes darting toward the attic. The smiling one, she'd whisper, her voice brittle. He feeds on memories. Beware. I returned to the attic, determined to confront the figure. The air was thick with tension, and the light bulb flickered as if struggling against an unseen force. The photographs lay scattered, their subjects oblivious to the malevolence lurking behind them. And there it was, the figure, standing by the window, its smile mocking. I approached cautiously, my breath hitching. "Who are you?" I demanded. "What do you want?" The figure tilted its head, its eyes hollow pits. "I am the keeper of forgotten moments," it rasped. "The memories discarded, the stories untold, I consume them all." "Why?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Because," it said, "I hunger." I stumbled backward, my mind reeling. The figure lunged, and I felt its icy fingers wrap around my wrist. "You've seen too much," it hissed. "Now you're mine." I woke in my bed, drenched in sweat. The figure was gone, but its words echoed in my mind. My grandmother lay still in her room, her eyes vacant. She had become a vessel for the specter, her memories fading like old photographs left in the sun. As I sat by her bedside, I realized the truth: the figure was no mere ghost. It was a parasite, feeding off our past, erasing our existence. And now, it hungered for me. The figure's grip tightened, its bony fingers digging into my flesh. I struggled, but it was relentless. "What do you want from me?" I gasped. "Your memories," it whispered, its breath fetid. "The moments you've hidden away, the pain, the joy, the secrets. Give them to me." I closed my eyes, memories flooding my mind. The day my sister disappeared in the woods, the taste of my grandmother's cinnamon cookies, the whispered promises of a childhood friend. I felt them slipping away, like sand through my fingers. "Why?" I choked out. "Why feed on memories?" The figure leaned closer, its grin stretching impossibly wide. "Because memories are power," it said. "They shape reality. And I hunger for more." I had to stop it. But how? Desperation fueled my resolve. "Make a pact with me," I said. "Release my grandmother. Take me instead." The figure hesitated, its eyes flickering. "You would sacrifice yourself?" "For her," I replied. "For all of us." It released my wrist, and I stumbled back. "Very well," it said. "A pact it is." We clasped hands, and the room trembled. The figure's form wavered, merging with mine. Memories flooded my senses, the taste of cinnamon, the echo of laughter, the pain of loss. And then, it was done. My grandmother stirred, her eyes clearing. "You saved me," she whispered. "But at a cost," I said. "The figure, it's part of me now." She smiled, her hand on mine. "We'll face it together." As days turned into weeks, I felt the figure's hunger. It whispered secrets, showed me forgotten moments. But I resisted, clinging to my memories, my identity. And now, as I write this, I see it, the figure, lurking in the corner of my room. Its smile wider, hungrier. It wants more. I fear the day when it consumes me entirely, erasing my existence. But until then, I'll fight. For my memories, for my family, for the stories left untold. The smiling specter awaits. Story 16. The Haunting Melody. I had always found solace in the quiet hum of my car's engine, a respite from the world's cacophony. But that tranquility was shattered the day the radio came to life with a song I had never heard before. It was a melody so distorted, so otherworldly, it seemed a chorus of the dead had taken over the airwaves. The static-laden voice sang of sorrow and loss, a tune that clawed at the edges of my sanity. Each day, the same haunting song played, no matter how frantically I spun the dial searching for another station. It was as if the radio was possessed, locked to this single, chilling broadcast. I tried to ignore it, to drown it out with my own humming, but the spectral song seeped into my thoughts, an uninvited intruder that refused to leave. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of blood and fire, I turned the radio off, hoping for silence. But the singing didn't stop. It grew louder, clearer, as if the phantoms were in the car with me, their cold breath whispering against my neck. Panic gripped me. I could feel their presence, see shadows flitting in the rearview mirror. The car became a prison, the song a warden that wouldn't let me go. I drove aimlessly, trying to escape, but the road ahead stretched into infinity, the melody a chain binding me to this endless loop of asphalt and dread. At home, the silence of the night was a stark contrast to the chaos of the day. But as I lay in bed, the song played on, a soft murmur in the darkness. I couldn't tell if it was in my head or if the dead had followed me, their song a haunting lullaby that promised no sleep, only nightmares. The next day, I sought answers. A local priest listened with a furrowed brow, his fingers clutching a crucifix as if it could ward off the evil I described. He spoke of exorcism, of spirits clinging to the living, but his words offered no comfort, only a confirmation of my fears. As I write this, the song plays on, a never-ending loop that has become my tormentor. I can feel eyes upon me, hear whispers in the static. The radio is silent, unplugged, yet the melody persists. I fear what will happen when the song ends, when the dead decide they want more than just a listener. The radio song led me to the outskirts of town, where the forest loomed like a forgotten secret. The trees stood tall and ancient, their gnarled branches reaching for the heavens. I parked my car by the edge of the woods, the melody still echoing in my mind. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the forest floor. I stepped into the darkness, my footsteps muffled by a thick carpet of fallen leaves. The air smelled of damp earth and decay, and the song grew louder, pulling me deeper into the heart of the woods. As I walked, I noticed strange markings on the trees, symbols etched into the bark, symbols that seemed to writhe and twist. They pulsed with an otherworldly energy, and I traced them with trembling fingers. The song guided me, its rhythm matching the beat of my heart. The deeper I went, the more the forest changed. The trees leaned in, their branches forming a canopy that blocked out the moon and stars. The ground became uneven, roots snaking across my path like skeletal fingers. And still, the song played on, a siren's call that promised answers. I stumbled upon a clearing, a moonlit glade where the grass was unnaturally green. In the center stood an ancient oak, its trunk wider than any I had ever seen. Its bark bore the same symbols, but here they glowed, casting eerie shadows on the ground. I pressed my palm against the oak, feeling its pulse, its life force. The song swirled around me, filling my ears, drowning out my thoughts. And then, from the darkness, a whisper, a voice that seemed to come from the very heart of the tree. "Listen," it said. "Listen to the forgotten tales, the lost souls. We are the keepers of memories, the weavers of fate." I tried to pull away, but the oak held me fast. The symbols burned into my skin, and I saw visions, faces contorted in pain, eyes hollow and empty. They were the dead, the ones who had sung this cursed melody long before me. "Why?" I asked, my voice barely a breath. "Why me?" The oak's whisper grew louder, filling my mind. "Because you are the listener, the one who can bridge the worlds. The song seeks release, and only you can grant it." I closed my eyes, tears slipping down my cheeks. The forest held its breath, waiting for my decision. And in that moment, I understood, I was bound to this place, to the haunting melody. To free the dead, I would have to become one of them. The oak's whisper faded, leaving me trembling in the moonlight. I had a choice, to flee, to forget this cursed place, or to embrace my role as the listener. The dead watched, their eyes gleaming from the shadows. I stepped away from the oak, my skin still tingling from its touch. The symbols on my palm glowed faintly, a mark of my newfound purpose. The song pulsed within me, urging me forward, deeper into the heart of the forest. The path twisted, and I stumbled upon a clearing unlike any other. Here, the grass was silver, dew-kissed, and in the center stood a stone pedestal. On it rested an old radio, its dials rusted, its casing cracked. The song emanated from its speakers, a mournful wail that seemed to come from the very earth. I approached the radio, my breath catching in my throat. The dead crowded around, their faces twisted in agony. They were the ones who had sung this melody, trapped in a cycle of despair. And now, it was my turn. I reached for the radio, my fingers trembling. The song grew louder, filling my ears, drowning out the world. The dial refused to move, stuck on this single station, the phantom broadcast that bridged the living and the dead. Sing, the oak's whisper echoed in my mind. Sing the song, and release us. I closed my eyes, my voice cracking as I began to sing. The words spilled forth, a language I didn't understand, yet it felt right. The dead joined in, their voices rising, harmonizing with mine. The air shimmered, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. And then, the impossible happened, the radio crackled, its casing splitting open. Light spilled forth, blinding me. The song swirled, lifting me off my feet, carrying me into the sky. I became one with the melody, a vessel for the dead. As I ascended, I glimpsed the world below, the twisted trees, the moonlit glade, the stone pedestal. And then, I saw myself, the car parked by the edge of the woods, the radio still playing, the song echoing through the night. I understood, I was the radio, the conduit for the dead. My body lay below, lifeless, while my spirit soared. The song would continue, a haunting refrain that would ensnare others, just as it had ensnared me. And so, I sing, my voice carried by the wind, reaching every corner of the earth. The dead listen, their eyes hollow, their souls yearning for release. But I am no longer afraid. I am the silent choir, the keeper of memories, the weaver of fate. And when the living turn off their radios, the singing won't stop. It will follow them, haunt them, until they, too, become part of the melody. Story 17. The Whispers of Edgewood. Every house has its creaks and whispers, but the old Edgewood mansion seemed to speak a language of its own. It started with faint scratches, like the scuttling of tiny claws that danced across the wooden door of my bedroom each night. At first, I thought it was just the wind, or perhaps a stray branch. But as the nights grew colder, the scratches deepened, carving grooves into the wood that seemed to spell out a silent warning. I tried to ignore it, to bury my head under the pillows and will myself to sleep. But then, the whispers began. Soft and insidious, they slithered into my ears, calling my name with a familiarity that chilled my bones. Evelyn, they breathed, a sigh that felt like a caress from the other side of the door. The third night, I mustered the courage to ask, "What do you want?" The scratching paused, and for a moment, there was silence. Then, a single word was etched into the wood, glowing faintly in the moonlight, "Come." The following evening, I found an old book in the library, its pages yellowed with age, detailing the history of Edgewood. It spoke of a family tragedy, of a daughter lost to the grip of fever, her spirit unable to move on. I wondered if she was the one reaching out from the beyond, seeking solace or perhaps company. On the fifth night, the scratches formed a countdown, and I realized with a sinking heart that it would end on the seventh night. I was not alone in this realization. The house seemed to hold its breath, the very walls bracing for what was to come. The sixth night brought a storm, the thunder mirroring the frantic pace of my heart. As lightning illuminated the room, I saw the scratches multiply, forming a pattern that beckoned me closer. I reached out, my fingers trembling, and as I touched the grooves, the whispers crescendoed into a cacophony. Now, as the seventh night falls, the door creaks open, revealing only darkness beyond. The scratches have formed a doorway, and the whispers have turned into a siren's call. I stand on the threshold, knowing that whatever lies beyond is no longer content to simply whisper my name. The door swung open, revealing a yawning abyss. I hesitated, my breath catching in my throat. The darkness beyond seemed to pulse, as if it had a heartbeat of its own. The scratches beckon me forward, their edges sharp against my fingertips. "Come," the whispers urged, and I stepped over the threshold. The air changed, thickening with an otherworldly chill. The walls of Edgewood seemed to close in, pressing against my skin like 1,000 unseen hands. I stumbled forward, my footsteps echoing in the void. The mansion had secrets, layers upon layers of forgotten memories. As I descended a narrow staircase, the walls whispered fragments of the past. A child's laughter, a mother's lullaby, and then, a guttural scream that tore through the silence. I clutched the banister, my knuckles white, and wondered what horrors had unfolded within these walls. The scratching intensified, the grooves now etched into the stone steps. Each mark seemed to resonate with pain, as if the very fabric of Edgewood absorbed the suffering of those who had lived and died here. I pressed on, driven by a compulsion I couldn't explain. In the heart of the mansion, I found a room bathed in an eerie glow. The walls were adorned with faded tapestries, their threads unraveling to reveal scenes of joy and sorrow. A cradle stood in the corner, its wood worn smooth by time. I approached it, my breath catching as I saw the name carved into the headboard, Evelyn. The whispers coalesced into words, their syllables like shards of glass. "She waits," they murmured. "She wants you to know." I sank to my knees, my fingers tracing the letters of my name. Evelyn, the lost daughter, the one who had slipped between the cracks of life and death. Her spirit lingered here, caught in a perpetual twilight. But why? What did she seek? As the clock struck midnight, the room shifted. Shadows danced across the walls, their forms elongated and grotesque. I glimpsed Evelyn, her eyes hollow, her skin translucent. She reached out, her fingers brushing my cheek, and I felt a surge of memories flood my mind. Evelyn had loved the moon, its silver glow soothing her restless soul. But she had also feared it, for the moon revealed her true nature. She was no ordinary child, she was a vessel, a conduit for something ancient and hungry. And on the 7th night, the moon would claim her. I stumbled back, my heart pounding. The scratches on the door had been her desperate plea, a warning to stay away. But I had crossed the threshold, and now, I was bound to her fate. The shadows closed in, their whispers merging into a single command: save her. The moon hung low in the sky, casting its silvery glow over Edgewood. I stood at the edge of the garden, the grass damp beneath my feet. Evelyn's whispers guided me, urging me toward the ancient oak tree that stood like a sentinel. Its gnarled branches reached for the heavens, and as I approached, I saw the scratches, deeper now, etched into the bark. They formed a spiral, a gateway to realms beyond. Evelyn's spirit hovered nearby, her eyes wide and pleading. "You must make a choice," she murmured. "The moon demands a sacrifice." I glanced up, and there it was, a blood moon, crimson and hungry. Its light bathed the oak tree, revealing the hollow at its base. Within, a pool of liquid silver shimmered, its surface rippling with secrets. Evelyn's memories, her pain, her longing, all trapped within. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Evelyn's gaze bore into mine. "To break the cycle," she said. "The moon feeds on souls, but it can be sated. You must offer yourself willingly, become the vessel in my stead." I recoiled. Why would I do that? "Because," she whispered, "the moon's hunger grows. If it is not appeased, it will consume everything, the living and the dead." I had seen the signs, the withering flowers, the sickly animals, the nightmares that plagued the town. The moon's influence stretched beyond Edgewood, threatening to devour all in its path. And Evelyn, poor lost soul, had been its pawn for centuries. I stepped closer to the hollow, my heart pounding. "What happens to me?" "You will become like me," Evelyn said. "A guardian, a keeper of balance. You will hear the scratches, feel the whispers, and when the moon wanes, you will offer yourself willingly." "But what if I refuse?" Evelyn's eyes darkened. "Then the moon will take what it wants. It will tear through the veil, and chaos will follow. You have no choice." I hesitated, torn between duty and self-preservation. The scratches on the oak tree seemed to pulse, urging me to decide. I thought of the townspeople, their lives intertwined with Edgewood's fate. Could I condemn them to darkness? As the blood moon reached its zenith, I stepped into the hollow. The liquid silver enveloped me, seeping into my skin, my bones. I felt Evelyn's presence merge with mine, her memories flooding my mind. The moon accepted its bargain, and I became its vessel. Now, I stand by the bedroom door, the scratches on my skin mirroring those on the wood. The whispers have become my own, and every night, I hear my name. The moon waxes, and I know what awaits, the hunger, the sacrifice. Edgewood sleeps, unaware of the pact that binds us. But as the scratches deepen, I wonder if they, too, will hear the whispers. And when the blood moon rises again, will they offer themselves willingly? The end. Subscribe for more true scary stories. Thanks for watching.